This morning, President Trump praised Vivek Ramaswamy's debate performance. So on Truth Social, he referenced Vivek's own praise of a former president, saying, and I quote, "This answer gave Vivek Ramaswamy a big win in the debate because of a thing called truth."
Now, according to Twitter, President Trump's interview with Tucker Carlson garnered more than 74 million views. But it's important to note that Fox News has not yet released its numbers yet, and Twitter counts all views on its platform, including if you just scroll past the video.
So joining us now for more analysis on all of this is Democratic strategist and founding partner of Northern Starr Strategies, Mychael Starr Hopkins, and Sarah Chamberlain, President and CEO of Republican Man Street Partnership and founder of the Women to Women Conversations Tour. Welcome both.
Thanks for having us.
So, Sarah, this was a Republican debate, so I want to start with you. Yeah. I think expectations were highest of Vivek Ramaswamy and Ron DeSantis coming in just because of their position on the polls. We theoretically knew what Ron DeSantis' plan was going to be because of all these leaked memos. Do you feel Ron DeSantis stuck to that plan as we knew it?
He did, but I don't think it was a good plan. I do not think he had a good debate at all. He kind of stood there. He did not act as if he was the leader of that group. Personally, the one who is polling better in the Republican Main Street Partnership vote poll, Vivek, really commanded the stage where it should have been the governor from Florida. So it was a fascinating evening last night.
And Mychael, I guess we'll go to you. We can go to you and see, who do you think did the best on the stage? Who do you think underperformed? And, you're from the strategist from the other side of the aisle. What did you think of DeSantis' strategy going in? And A, did he follow through with that? And B, was it successful?
Yeah, I'll start off with Ron DeSantis. I've had, I don't know if I'd call it the pleasure, but I've gone up against Ron DeSantis in 2 campaigns that I've consulted on. He is a horrible debater. That's just kind of who he is. He's very stiff. He's very scripted. And that came off last night in his kind of over-caffeinated, extremely campaign-style performance. I think the debate in total, there wasn't really a winner. Yeah, Vivek got a lot of the attention, but the more attention he gets, the more scrutiny he's going to get. And I think Chris Christie put a lot of pressure on him when he talked about his comments in his book. We're now going to see reporters going back, looking at comments that Vivek has made over time. They're questioning about whether he said that we shouldn't support Israel. So while Vivek may seem like he was the one who got the most attention, I actually think in the long run, he's going to be the biggest loser of that debate.
So, Sarah, I guess responding to that, there is that Vivek channeled Trump in a lot of ways, but obviously doesn't have the power that Trump has to set the conversation. He seems a little bit, he's saying the things that Trump would say. Is that a better strategy for this first debate, or more of the, say, Nikki Haley strategy of showing more general election electability?
Okay, so I would actually love to put the two of them together and create one person. I think what he did, he fires up the base. It's very important. He cannot get to a general election unless he has the base. What we're finding in our polling is suburban women like him. So he's got to get through the base, fire everybody up to get to the general, and then I think he has a really good shot against President Biden. Nikki Haley, I thought, did a wonderful job. She's kind of quiet, but she's thoughtful. Her comments were right on. The problem is that does not play for a primary. That plays more for the general. So it was interesting, the two of them and their different strategies. It's almost like one would be a great president, one would be a great vice president. But I thought Nikki Haley did a wonderful job. And actually, to be honest, a little bit better than I was anticipating, because as your last guest said, she has started a slow campaign, but she certainly picked up traction last night.
Sarah, I want to pick up on something you just said, that the candidates need the base. They need to have this Republican base, which has really turned into a conglomerate of Trump supporters and people who are in favor of former President Trump. So when you look on that debate stage, there were a number of jabs made at former President Trump. You saw that from Nikki Haley. You saw that from Mike Pence during the January 6th conversation, of course, from Chris Christie. So in your opinion, from being a Republican strategist and advising some of these campaigns, in Republican campaigns in general, having an intimate knowledge of how they work, do you think that them sort of trying to talk to maybe some never Trump voters or people who are still Republicans but not so sure with former President Trump, do you think that just sort of counts them out of this primary overall?
It doesn't help them, certainly, and you can see that reflected in the polls. Our polling at Republican Main Street Partnership, of course, says Trump first, but Vivek is a very strong second. Again, right now, they've got to be pulling the Trump voters away from Donald Trump. In order to do that is you have to do what Vivek did last night. Nikki Haley ran a great general debate. Vivek ran a primary debate, and that's just the difference between the two. And whether we like it or not as a party, that is where our party is. And we need to in order to get to the general, we have got to get through a primary. And I would say, we talk about the more mainstream Republicans, but they're not voting in the primaries, and that's a problem. So the people who are voting in the primaries, we have to go out and appeal to in order to get to the general, and that's what happened last night.
Let me add to that real quick, because I think what Republicans are doing, the biggest problem is while running for a primary, they're doing nothing to position themselves for a general. All they're doing in this primary is creating attack ads for Democrats. And it's really going to create a problem in the long run. You had Vivek stand on stage and say that climate change is a hoax. You had candidates stand on stage and say that they would support a ban on abortion, both federal and some flip-flopped on whether they would support state bans. This isn't something that's going to bring in independents and suburban voters. And so when you look at the polls, you see Trump losing to President Biden now by 6. There's no candidate in the primary that's going to pull away from Trump voters. So the question is going to be, what do you do when you have this large group of Republicans who are diehard Trump voters who likely aren't going to support someone else? And then heading into a general, if Trump isn't the nominee, likely either aren't going to vote or going to protest vote. Republicans have put themselves in a position where it's political suicide.
So Mychael, I'm actually not seeing that. I'm sorry. I'm not seeing that in our polling. The abortion issue that was discussed last night, yes, the majority of the people that we polled, including suburban women, want it to be a state issue. But if it's not a state issue, they support the European ban on abortion, which is 17 weeks. So 71% of the people we polled support a national ban on abortion at 17 weeks.
On this point,
that is something that is playing well, and that will play well in the general. Vivek talked about mental health. That's a huge issue out there for suburban women. Again, that will play well in the general election against Joe Biden.
On this point of general election electability, Mychael, you sort of preempted my question there, but I mean, we had, yes, the hoax comment was very strong. I do assume that is going to show up in Democratic ads in the future. The bombing Mexico idea, bombing our biggest trade partner, that was there was very little pushback on those, but of the candidates that you saw on stage, especially of the viable candidates, which one gave Democrats less fodder to create those ads in the general election?
I would probably say Tim Scott, just because his performance was forgettable. When you really go back and think about what lines landed and who actually put out policy, the entire debate was pretty forgettable. Yeah, Vivek had some lines that people are going to laugh at and will go viral on Twitter, but most of the voters in America don't exist on Twitter. And so one of the big problems with what we saw in the debate last night was that debate was positioned purely for Twitter and Fox News. Well, you've got 300, maybe 250 million people in America who don't turn into Twitter, who don't turn into Fox News. And so when you have this echo chamber, you create a discussion that only exists in that echo chamber. And the problem is that the rest of America doesn't exist there. And so the longer you have the Viveks of the world, the DeSantises of the world, Republicans are really going to have a problem because no one took heavy shots at Trump. Like you said, they were jabs, no haymakers. And Republicans can't run purely as the second option to Trump. At some point, someone's going to have to take on Trump, and that's been Chris Christie. But like we saw on that debate stage, Chris Christie continuously got booed every time he did that. He's starting to rise in New Hampshire, but I don't really see a world where Republicans embrace someone like him.
Sarah, I want to ask you, on this topic of former President Trump and now bring in Mike Pence, former vice president. According to the New York Times, he had the most speaking time in last night's debate, which I think some people were perhaps a bit surprised of. He's typically a bit more reserved, a bit quieter, but he came out swinging in last night's debate. Right there on the screen, he had the most speaking time. There was one part of the debate that I found very interesting when the moderators asked the candidates on stage if they think that Mike Pence did the right thing on January 6th. Of course, January 6th, a very polarizing topic, but framing the question in a way that would either approve or disapprove of what Mike Pence did on that day. And people by and large said that he did the right thing. I'm curious to know what you thought of that moment in the sense of focusing on Mike Pence. And then when we get back to that conversation of, you need to have the base to win the Republican nomination. Even someone like Ron DeSantis said that he doesn't have any beef with what Mike Pence did on January 6th. How do you see that playing out among a Republican electorate?
I think most people, except the really far extreme, support what Mike Pence did on January 2nd. January 6th, I had a lot of members of Congress there. They certainly support what he did. He protected and stood up for the Constitution of the United States of America. I was pleased to see everybody supporting what he did. Having said that, I don't think he will end up being the nominee. I think he's going to have a tough time getting through the primaries. Even though they support what he did, they're still angry that he supposedly won against Donald Trump. So I think the Trump base will not be willing to vote for him. I think they're going to be looking for another option if Trump does go down with his criminal activity that he has been indicted with.
So, Sarah, on that point, I mean, there's at least one very mainstream Republican who does not support what Pence did. His name is Donald Trump.
Right.
Do you see this debate as sort of the first in a series of reality shows to find Donald Trump's running mate? Some people do see it that way, and if that's the case, like how can they say they agree with Pence, with what Pence did, and then go on a ticket with Trump?
Oh, I think that will all be forgotten when the time comes. I think whoever Trump picks, he'll forget that they supported Mike Pence. If it's even Donald Trump, I kind of agree at times with Chris Sununu that maybe it's not going to be Trump or Biden. It would be really nice to see the country move past 80-year-old men leading us. So we'll have to wait and see. But I do think if it's Trump, whoever he picks, he won't care that they supported Mike Pence.
Mychael, I want to just take us quickly to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Whether or not the president was watching the debate closely, he was commenting in real time on Twitter. He had a couple wisecracks at one point saying what she said to something Nikki Haley mentioned about Republicans adding to the national debt. But curiously, at the end of the debate, there was a statement put out by the campaign, not from President Biden, but from Vice President Kamala Harris. She's obviously taken a lot of fire from some of these Republican candidates. A lot of the Republican candidates have said that they're not running against Biden, but they're running against Kamala Harris. Curious what you thought of that strategy of the White House, of the Biden campaign putting out a statement from Kamala Harris when, of course, her poll numbers, her favorabilities have been down, and some have questioned if she would perhaps be a drag on the ticket come 2024.
The Biden campaign, I think, is running a really smart strategy when it comes to how they're going to execute criticizing and critiquing Republicans. They're letting Vice President Harris be the one to execute that case, which is smart, given that she's a former attorney general. She's a former prosecutor. Much like Chris Christie, she understands how to prosecute a case. So letting Joe Biden be above the fray and really talk about the accomplishments and the positive sides while allowing Vice President Harris to really be that attack dog and and really prosecute why Republicans are unfit, I think is a really smart move. I think one of the most devastating moments in the debate last night was when Ron DeSantis looked to his left and looked to his right when asked whether or not he would endorse Donald Trump given the indictments. The lack of political courage on the stage, I think, is something that voters will not ignore.
So, Sarah, easy one. There were a lot of surprises. I thought one of the surprises for me was to see a very combative Mike Pence. Some of Vivek Ramaswamy's comments were designed to be surprising, but they still were. What was it for you? What was something that you didn't expect to see last night?
There's actually two things. First of all, Nikki Haley did much better than I thought she was going to going into it. I thought she had a great night. And the other thing is Chris Christie, I thought was going to have more one-liners and really kind of command the stage. He didn't seem to do that. So that surprised me. Those were the two biggest surprises.
And Mychael, same with you. What were you surprised by last night?
I was surprised, one, by Tim Scott. I expected him to have more of a presence on the stage. He is someone who I think Democrats should look out for. He has a positive narration in the way he tells his story and his life experience. And I think, honestly, one thing that Democrats are going to have to really make sure we double down on is ensuring that African Americans come out to vote. I think with Tim Scott potentially on that ticket, that could be a real threat to Democrats. The other surprise was, like the other guest said, Chris Christie. I expected him to do a better job at prosecuting the case. He was a little slow on his feet to respond. And I think that his annoyance with Vivek really showed. I think the other one was just, let me say, I think Vice President Pence and Vivek reminded me of that Klobuchar, Mayor Pete energy and the annoyance that the VP showed during the debate.
All right. Well, Sarah, Mychael, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been great.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
And that'll do it for us. Thank you guys for joining us today for this post-debate conversation. And keep your eye on thehill.com for more coverage of the 2024 race and other news in politics and policy.